Your Holiness, if I may as well, I have a small token of Ontario's 13.2 million of us, by the way, a respect and affection for you and the good work you do, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just leave this with you, sir. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, ever Merciful. Honorable Premier, all the distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. I would like to first of all take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Premier of Ontario, who has arranged this function and has given me the opportunity to attend this event and to say a few words to all of you. When our National President informed me that the Premier of Ontario wished to host such a function, the first thought came into my mind was that I should make my apologies with a deep sense of appreciation, particularly taking into consideration that my community had already given me a very busy schedule during my visit to Canada. However, later it occurred to me that this invitation had been given due to the fact that the Ahmadiyya community had made very good relations with the local people and its leadership, and especially the way the leadership, the Premier, reciprocate this relationship. It is indeed of most importance that where a dignitary or important person from any nation takes such a step of goodness and kindness, then it should not be rejected in any way. In fact, Islam teaches that the hand of friendship of no person should ever be rejected. And so, therefore, certainly if a leading figure of the country takes such a step, then there is no doubt that will be fully appreciated. Thus, this made it essential for me to change my initial thoughts and so accept the kind and sincere invitation of the Honorable Premier of Ontario. If I had failed to do this, then it would have been similar to a person who goes into the home of another and rather than meeting with his host and taking permission, instead goes directly to the kitchen and eats as he pleases and takes full benefits of his home before departing. Certainly, such behavior is a reflection of indecency and not at all appropriate. In particular, this lack of courtesy becomes ever more apparent when the host is giving full attention and treating the guests in such a kind and welcoming manner. Bearing all of this in mind, I deemed it essential to attend regardless of my busy schedule. And so, in short, I could not reject this hand of friendship, as it would have been a sign of huge indecency and ungratefulness. This was particularly so, given that in this instance, the homeowner has opened the doors to his home with such an open heart. Therefore, to reject the invitation of such a kind and decent host would be a huge oversight on my part. On the one hand, we Ahmadi Muslims claim that we are the one who display the highest moral standards. And so, how could it be that on the other hand, we did not respond to friendship with friendship? How could it be that we did not respond to love with love? And for me personally exists an even greater responsibility to display high moral standards, because it is my duty to set or try to set the example for all Ahmadis to follow. If my actions are not in keeping with our teachings and are just mere guidance for others, then such teachings can prove to be of no value and cannot gain any of God's blessings. Keeping in view all of these points, from the depth of my heart, I wish to convey my deep gratitude to Premier of Ontario, that with such kindness he has welcomed and embraced me to this country in his province by holding this event. This is certainly an example of greatness and high moral values on your part. The appreciation that I am expressing is also a necessary part of my faith, because our Master, the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, has taught us that he who is ungrateful to man is actually ungrateful to Allah the Almighty. Thus, as a person who claims to be religious and who believes that his every good act will lead to God's rewards and pleasure, and who believes that nothing else can compare of God's rewards, it becomes ever more incumbent upon me that I should praise the goodness and high moral values of the people of God. A few days ago, at a function also held here in Canada, I said that it is the Canadian people who have always taken the first step in developing relations with me. And this is a true picture of the high moral values of its people. However, I should also say that the history of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community bears witness to the fact that when we grasp a hand of friendship, then we make full efforts to fulfill the rights of that friendship forever. We endeavor to never let go that hand, and so from this perspective, I am very confident that our future relations will continue to develop in a positive manner. As I have already spoken about high moral values, I would like to continue by speaking about what Islam says in relation to high moral standards and its guiding principle in relation to this. Certainly, the world today stands in great need of such values. Only through fulfilling each other's rights can our local environment, our society, our cities, our provinces, and our nations come to be a true paradise on the earth. The Holy Quran has instructed that if a person is a true Muslim, then it requires that from his every act and deed, it should be evident that he teaches righteous acts and always strive to prevent others from sin and evil. The foundation for all righteous deeds has also been taught to us, and that is that in every act and at all times, a person must display truth and honesty. A person who departs from honesty does not have complete faith, because it proves that his faith lies not with God but elsewhere. The standards of truth given by Islam are that your every word should be straightforward and accurate. It is only through the right word that confidence and trust can develop. And it is trust that is a means for guaranteeing peace. If this golden principle is followed at every level, then a spirit of peace and harmony will spread throughout all of society, from our domestic family units to the wider world, and indeed in terms of the relations between nations. We find that today the situation of the world is extremely grave, whereby there is strife and disorder in all parts of the world and a lack of peace. The root cause of all this is that mutual trust and confidence does not exist due to a lack of honesty and integrity. Governments makes deals or pass laws that on the surface say one thing, but at an underhand level they have already made their own deals which are against the spirit of truth. Thus, Islam teaches that all deals and treaties should be made openly and without any form of ambiguity. The thought process underpinning agreements should not be a hope to get the upper hand or derive greater benefit than the other party. Instead, the focus and ambition should be to achieve mutual benefit and equity. Sometimes I become worried that the lack of trust and lack of honesty that we find in many countries will lead us to a grave and devastating war, where man does not fulfill the rights of others but tries to usurp them. Then it is natural that the divine decree will take its hold. The end result is restlessness, a lack of contentment, and indeed wars come to pass. We are all aware that in the past few years there has been a global financial crisis that has caused widespread pain and torment. Apart from this, in certain countries, severe internal disorder has occurred, whereby the people and their governments are fighting against each other. Similarly, we also find that some nations are displaying hostilities and malice towards other countries. It is my opinion that this tragic state of affairs is all due to a lack of trust and a lack of truth, which in turn is leading to a lack of justice. If we analyze the financial crisis of the past few years, we find that on the one hand, millions of people in many countries have been laid off from their jobs or have become bankrupt and lost their properties due to being unable to pay off bank loans. However, on the other hand, we find that there has been little or no difference to the huge bonuses, profits, or salaries of the top bankers and businessmen. Many of them have been able to walk away with millions of dollars without anyone questioning them or calling them to account. Such cases have been reported in the media, and so are increasing distrust amongst among the general public, which in turn is leading to restlessness. In a similar vein, we find that many businesses are based on falsehood and iniquity. Such organizations are run in a way that seek to take advantage of the vulnerable segments of society by luring them with great attractions, and so are making fools of them and proving them to be senseless. For example, if somebody wishes to sell something today, he will place huge signs or billboards on the street in an effort to lure other people towards items that they cannot really afford. In some way, television and other media are also being used to exploit innocent people by hugely inflating and exaggerating market prices. If we ponder over this, then we will realize that behind this effort to make money is a lack of truth, whereby people are being taken advantage of and their feelings and desires are being exploited. In terms of trade, the teachings of Islam are very clear. Islam teaches that under no circumstances should a person be charged even 1 cent more than the real value. If you look at the companions of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, we find countless examples of their integrity and honesty. For example, once a man from a village went to the city to sell his horse and sought 200 dirhams for it. The currency at that time, even it is being used nowadays in some Arab countries. However, the purchaser said that because it was a fine horse, very special horse, the real price ought to be 500 dirhams or more. Thus, the argument was that the seller wanted less money, whilst the purchaser wanted to pay more. The quarrel was based not on a desire to protect their own rights, but in an effort to protect the rights of the other party and to maintain true justice. This is the way to develop true trust and confidence, which in turn becomes a guarantor for peace and justice to develop within society. Another point taught by Islam is that you must use your own wealth to help those in need and those who are deprived. It teaches that a person should strive to fulfill the rights and needs of such people. A true spirit of sacrifice is required for a peaceful society to develop. Thus, it should not be that you help the poor and needy only out of what extra resources you have, but rather you should be willing to inflict hardship on yourself in an effort to help your brothers and sisters and fulfill their rights. Do not only help those countries which, according to your own treaties and deals, you are obliged to help, so that you can acquire certain benefits for yourself in return, but instead you should search for those who are truly deprived and from whom you can seek no personal benefit or fulfill any vested interest. Fulfill the rights of the needy as that is the means to develop real trust and confidence. Most importantly, it removes anxieties and frustrations, and as a result, peace in society is developed. Canada is one of those countries that seeks to help the poor and destitute parts of the world with a truly open heart and generous spirit. It has set up various humanitarian projects in an effort towards this. It is my prayer that this help and aid will always reach those who are truly deserving and who are truly in need. And I pray that Canada becomes a true beacon, an example for others to follow in terms of developing peace, and not just in your province, not just in your country, but in fact throughout the world. I also pray that you become a model of establishing honesty and integrity for the entire world to follow. The Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat throughout the world, and in particular in the poor countries, has set up many humanitarian projects in an effort to serve mankind. Of course, we work within our own resources, which are limited and small. However, we have still been able to establish hundreds of schools and many hospitals in remote parts of the world. We are also providing water and electricity in the most remote villages and towns. We have also set up a scheme to build model villages which have various facilities including solar energy, electricity, street lights, paved streets, and community centers. The model villages also provide drinking water on the doorsteps of the local people, where previously young children had to travel for miles to get any basic supply or a bucket of water. Thus, apart from propagating the message of God Almighty, we are providing humanitarian services completely irrespective of religion or background. We seek no praise or benefit, we seek only to serve mankind, and so please Allah the Almighty. May God enable mankind to come together to fulfill each other's mutual rights so that the world can become a true heaven of peace and harmony. At the end, I would like to once again thank the Honorable Premier and all of the distinguished guests. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Holiness, for your inspiring words. In fact, we're all inspired by the Ahmadiyya Muslims community's strong commitment to faith, family, and friendship, as well as to peaceful coexistence. Together with the Premier, we thank all of you for joining us at this luncheon today to honor His Holiness. Indeed, Your Holiness, your visit to Ontario has been wonderful. We admire your work to establish universal human rights and a just society. It's always wonderful for us to meet with people in our great province from so many diverse communities. And as the Premier reminds us, the more we get to know each other, understand each other, and develop our friendships, the more all of the people in Ontario and Canada will benefit. I hope you will join us with the honor of coming back to visit us again, and I wish you good health, happiness, and a safe journey home. And I look forward to seeing all of you again in the near future. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
Also wanted to acknowledge several other members of Congress who have come here, Representative Judy Chu, and also we have several other members who came earlier, Congressman Ted Poe, Senator Cornyn, several members of Congress who are still to come as well. It is now my distinct honor to introduce our next speaker, the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, Representative of California's 8th District and current Democratic leader of the U.S. House of Representatives. In 2007, Leader Pelosi became the first female Speaker of the House, a position she held until 2011. Leader Pelosi is the highest-ranking female politician in American history and has been and she has been described as, quote, an extraordinary leader for the American people by our President Barack Obama. I invite Leader Pelosi to the podium to share her remarks.
Good morning, Your Holiness, my colleagues. I'm so proud to be part of a very strong bipartisan welcome to you, Your Holiness, to the Capitol. Very proud of Congresswoman Lofgren's resolution to formalize that welcome. I thank Abjan Khan, the National Director of Public Affairs. Where'd you go? There, for your leadership and your kind introduction. Dr. Zafar, welcome to you as well. And it's always an honor for us to be with Katrina Lantos-Sweat, who brings to this event and to her work a great family tradition of protecting religious freedom and human rights throughout the world. I want to thank my friend Karim Ahmed for introducing me to the community and to his making me much more aware of the work of His Holiness and the leadership. We're very blessed in America with a large population of Muslim Americans. People from time to time say to me, there are more Muslims in America than there are in Qatar, for example. And I said, well, there are more Muslims in America than there are Episcopalians in America. And so just to give an idea of the strength of this community and what it means. And I'm very blessed in my district that I represent in San Francisco. And so recognizing that contribution, when I was elected Speaker, just within a matter of days, we had our first meeting, and I asked our newest member and first Muslim American, Keith Ellison, to do the opening prayer. It was our first prayer under a new majority, and he honored us with his beautiful prayer, and our members were very inspired by that and have been ever since. Since then, he has doubled the number of American, by 100%, he has increased the number of Muslim Americans in the Congress. With Congressman Carson, more to be done. But again, it is an honor to welcome you, Your Holiness, and I want to say it's an honor because you are a man, though of humble beginnings, your leadership has made you a figure of global prominence. You started as a teacher, and you have become a guide for millions of Muslims worldwide. You work to help farmers in Ghana. That humble task and you remain a force for progress across borders, an advocate for investment in the developing world. You have been persecuted for your beliefs, jailed for your faith, and exiled from your homeland, but you refuse to turn to bitterness or vengeance. And that is a very important lesson. Instead, His Holiness has emerged as a leader of wisdom and compassion, a champion of nonviolence among nations and respect among faiths. His Holiness and this community have had the courage to condemn terrorism no matter where or who perpetrates it, not simply because you were victims of violence yourselves, but because terror is wrong wherever and whenever it occurs. You have spoken out against violence of intolerance, even among fellow Muslims, not only because you have endured persecution firsthand, but because calling for the destruction of churches and synagogues or other houses of worship is a violation of basic human rights. You have taken your campaign for understanding across our country, and thank you for doing that. Serving as voices for moderation and the drive for peace, this community has done that. You have demonstrated clear and unwavering the community here. And as I say, my introduction has been through my friend Kareem Ahmed, but I know from him that the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has been a force demonstrating clear and unwavering loyalty to the United States. Again, promoting life in our community, blood drives. You're part of the community and saving lives. These messages and actions reflect the strength of this community and its commitment to our common humanity. And you do this not because all of the people, Your Holiness, the Ahmadiyya community does this not because all of the people that you serve are Muslim. You do this because you are Muslim, and that is your value system. To promote peace and pursue justice, to support human rights and secure the common good, to respect and the dignity of fellow human beings, to embrace and build a society rooted in equality, founded on pluralism, shaped and strengthened by our beautiful diversity. These principles rest at the core of American life and success. They are critical, unbreakable threads in the fabric of American history and progress. Together, by striving to live up to those values, we can strive to realize the hopes of His Holiness, that the peace of the world comes to be established before our very eyes. As we greet you on Capitol Hill, we take heed of your clarion call to action, that, quote, we must all endeavor to spread love, affection, and a sense of community. From the halls of Congress to the neighborhoods across our country to communities around the globe, we must all remain dedicated to the mission of peace and to the cause of justice. We must strengthen our nation and our world through love and understanding. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership role, for your being such a visionary, such an inspiration. It is an honor to be in the same room with you. Thank you for bringing us all together to honor you and for the work that you have led us in to build a better future. Thank you, Your Holiness. Thank you, Your Holiness.
Thank you very much, Leader Pelosi. Our next speaker is Dr. Ahsanullah Zafar, the current president of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Community USA, who will introduce to us our keynote speaker, His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Speaker Pelosi, well, Leader Pelosi now, but I always remember that part. Members of the Senate and Congress, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to pass the podium on to Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, who is the 5th Caliph or successor of the Messiah Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani alayhi salam, as was mentioned, from about 1889 when he declared his claim. We are a worldwide community in almost 200 countries in the world. Our numbers are small, our resources are limited, but it is the grace which is brought by his leadership that we are able to do things in a much larger scale and a much more effective fashion than would happen otherwise. The message that we carry is that if you are being hurt, do not respond with hurt, respond with prayers, respond with persuasion, and we have demonstrated again under his guidance throughout the world, especially in Pakistan, where most of the Ahmadis who are here, they came from. He taught us that humanity, a human being, is the fundamental source of respect for all of us and actually for anyone in this world. And we serve humanity not because they have our faith, but because they are human beings. And these things are being done in Africa, where we are providing the resources for education, for healthcare, and for basic human needs such as clean water. Now we started with some solar electrical supplies as well on a limited scale. But the effects are grand because of the benefit of his leadership and the inspiration he provides us. And that is what keeps us going as members, and I think that is what is the dominant part of how we are successful in so many different locations. And with that, I will stop and I'll let him do the presentation because that's what the value really is. Thank you. Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad Khalifatul Masih al-Khamis.
Assalam, please be seated. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Gracious, Ever Merciful. All distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. Before proceeding, I would like to first of all take this opportunity to thank you all for taking time to come and listen to what I have to say. I have been requested to speak about a subject that is extremely vast and wide-ranging. It has many different aspects, and therefore it is not possible for me to cover all of them in the short time available. And the subject that I have been asked to speak about is the establishment of world peace. Certainly, this is the most vital and pressing issue facing the world today. However, as the time is limited, I will only briefly give the Islamic viewpoint on the establishment of peace through just and equal relations between nations. The truth is that peace and justice are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. And certainly, this principle is something that all wise and intelligent people understand. Leaving aside those people who are determined to create disorder in the world. No one can ever claim that in any society, country, or even the entire world, there can be disorder or a lack of peace where justice and fair dealing exists. Nevertheless, we find that in many parts of the world, disorder and a lack of peace are prevalent. Such disorder is visible both internally within countries and externally in terms of the relations between various nations. Such disorder and strife exists even though all governments claim to make policies that are based on justice. And all claim that the establishment of peace is their primary objective. Yet, in general, there is little doubt that restlessness and anxiety is increasing in the world, and so disorder is spreading. This clearly proves that somewhere along the line, the requirements of justice are not being fulfilled. Therefore, there is an urgent need to try and end inequality wherever and whenever it exists. And so, as the worldwide head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, I would like to make a few observations about the need for and the ways to achieve peace based on justice. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community is purely religious community. It is our firm belief that the Messiah and Reformer who was destined to appear in this age and enlighten the world as to Islam's true teachings has indeed arrived. We believe that the founder of our community, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, was that very promised Messiah and Reformer, and thus we have accepted him. He presses upon his followers to act and propagate the real and true teachings of Islam that are based on the Holy Quran. Therefore, everything that I will say in relation to establishing peace and in relation to conducting just international relations will be based on Quranic teachings. In relation to achieving world peace, all of you regularly express your opinions and indeed make great efforts. Your creative and intelligent minds allow you to present great ideas, plans, and indeed a vision of peace. Thus, this issue does not require me to speak from a worldly or political perspective. But instead, my entire focus will be on how to establish peace based on religion. And for this purpose, I shall, as I have earlier said, present some very important guidelines based on the teachings of the Holy Quran. It is important to always remember that human knowledge and intellect is not perfect, but is in fact limited. Thus, when making decisions or forming thoughts, often certain factors enter human minds which can cloud judgment. and lead to a person trying to fulfill his own rights. Ultimately, this can lead to an unjust outcome and decision being made. However, God's law is perfect, and so no vested interests or unfair provisions exist. This is because God only desires for the good and betterment of His creation. And therefore, His law is based entirely on justice. The day the people of the world come to recognize and understand this crucial point will be the day that the foundation for true and everlasting peace will be laid. Otherwise, we continue to find that although efforts are endlessly made to establish world peace, yet they are unable to provide any worthwhile results. After the conclusion of the First World War, the leaders of certain countries desired for good and peaceful relations between all nations in future. Thus, in an effort to achieve world peace, the League of Nations was formed. Its principal aim was to maintain world peace and to prevent future wars from breaking out. Unfortunately, the rules of the League and resolutions it passed had certain flaws and weaknesses, and so they did not properly protect the rights of all peoples and all nations equally. Hence, as a result of the inequalities that existed, long-term peace could not prevail. The efforts of League failed, and this led directly to World War II. We are all aware of the unparalleled destruction and devastation that ensued, where around 75 million people globally lost their lives, many of whom were innocent civilians. That war should have been more than enough to open the eyes of the world. It should have been a means to developing wise policies that granted all parties their due rights, based on justice, and thus proved to be a means of establishing peace in the world. The world's governments at the time did endeavor to some extent to try and establish peace, and hence the United Nations was established. However, it soon became quite apparent that the noble and overarching objective underpinning the United Nations could not be fulfilled. Indeed, today, certain governments quite openly make statements that prove its failure. What does Islam say in relation to international relations that are based on justice and so a means of establishing peace? In the Holy Quran, God Almighty has made it clear that whilst our nationalities or ethnic backgrounds act as a means of identity, they do not entitle or validate any form of superiority of any kind. The Quran thus makes clear that all people are born equal. Furthermore, in final sermon ever delivered by the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, he instructed all Muslims to always remember that an Arab is not superior to a non-Arab, and nor is a non-Arab superior to an Arab. And he taught that a white person is not superior to a black person, and nor is a black person superior to a white person. Thus, it is clear teaching of Islam that the people of all nationalities and all races are equal. It is also made clear that all people should be granted equal rights without any discrimination or prejudice. This is the key and golden principle that lays the foundation for harmony between different groups and nations and for the establishment of peace. However, today we find that there is division and separation between powerful and weaker nations. For example, in the United Nations, we find that there is a distinction made between certain countries. Thus, in the Security Council, there are some permanent members and some non-permanent members. This division has proved to be an internal source of anxiety and frustration, and thus we regularly hear reports of certain countries protesting against this inequality. Islam teaches absolute justice and equality in all matters, and so we find another very crucial guideline in chapter 5, verse 3 of the Holy Quran. In this verse, it states that to fully comply with the requirements of justice, it is necessary to treat even those people who go beyond all limits in their hatred and enmity with fairness and equity. And the Quran teaches that wherever and whoever counsels you towards goodness and virtue, you should accept it. And wherever and whoever counsels you towards sinful or unjust behavior, you should reject it. A question that naturally arises is that what is the standard of justice required by Islam? In chapter 4, verse 136, the Holy Quran states that even if you have to testify against yourself or your parents or your most loved ones, then you must do so in order to uphold justice and to uphold the truth. Powerful and rich countries should not usurp the rights of the poor and weaker countries in an effort to preserve their own rights, and nor should they deal with the poorer nations in an unjust fashion. On the other hand, the poor and weaker nations should not seek to inflict harm on the powerful or wealthy nations whenever the opportunity arises. Instead, both sides should endeavor to fully abide by the principles of justice, and indeed this is a matter of crucial importance in maintaining peaceful relations between countries. Another requirement for peace between nations based on justice is given in chapter 15 of the Holy Quran, in verse 59, where it states that no party should ever look enviously at the resources and wealth of others. And similarly, no country should seek to unjustly appropriate or take over the resources of another country on the false pretext of trying to assist or support them. Thus, on the basis of providing technical expertise, governments should not take advantage of other nations by making unjust trade deals or contracts. And similarly, on the basis of providing expertise or assistance, governments should not try to take control of the natural resources or assets of the developing nations. Where less educated people or governments need to be taught how to properly utilize their natural resources, then this should be done. Then nations and governments should always seek to serve and help those less fortunate. However, such service should not be rendered with an aim of achieving national or political benefits or as a means to fulfill vested interests. We find that in the past 6 or 7 decades, the United Nations has launched many programs or foundations aiming to help the poor countries to progress. Towards this effort, they have explored the natural resources of the developing nations. However, despite these efforts, none of the poorer countries have reached this stage or level of the developed nations. One reason for this is certainly wide-ranging corruption by many of the governments of those underdeveloped countries. With regret, though, I must say that despite this as a means to further their own interests, the developed nations have continued to deal with such governments. Trade deals, international aid, and business contracts have continued to be processed. And as a result, the frustration and restlessness of the poor and deprived segments of society have continued to increase, and this has led to rebellion and internal disorder within those countries. The poor people of the developing countries have become so frustrated that they have turned against not only their own leaders but also the big powers as well. This has played into the hands of the extremist groups who have taken advantage of the frustrations and so have been able to encourage such people towards joining their groups and supporting their hate-filled ideology. And the ultimate result of this has been that the peace of the world has been destroyed. Thus, Islam has drawn our attention to various means for peace. It requires absolute justice. It requires truthful testimony to always be given. It requires that our glances are not cast enviously in the direction of the wealth of others, and it requires that the developed nations put aside their own vested interests and instead help and serve the less developed and poorer nations with a truly selfless attitude and spirit. If all of these factors are observed, then true peace will be established. If, despite all these aforementioned measures, any country transgresses all limits and attacks another country and seeks to unjustly take control of its resources, then other countries should certainly take measures to stop such cruelty. But they should always act with justice when doing so. The circumstances for taking action based on Islamic teachings are detailed in the Holy Quran in chapter 49, where it says, it teaches that where two nations are in dispute and this leads to war, then other governments should strongly counsel them towards dialogue and diplomacy so that they can come to an agreement and reconciliation on the basis of a negotiated settlement. However, if one of the parties does not accept the terms of agreement and wages war, then other countries should unite together and fight to stop that aggressor. When the aggressive nation is defeated and he agrees to mutual negotiation, then all parties should work together and should work towards an agreement which leads to long-standing peace and reconciliation. Harsh and unjust conditions should not be enforced that lead to the hands of any nation being tied, because in the long term that will lead to restlessness which will ferment and spread. And the result of such restlessness will be further disorder. In circumstances where a third-party government seeks to bring about reconciliation between two parties, then it should act with sincerity and total impartiality. And this impartiality should remain even if one of the parties speaks against it. And so the third party should display no anger in such circumstances and should seek no revenge or act in any unfair manner. All parties should be afforded their due rights. Thus, for the requirements of justice to be fulfilled, it is essential that the countries who are negotiating a settlement should themselves not seek to fulfill their own personal interests or to try and derive benefit unduly from either country. They should not interfere unjustly or pressure either of the parties unfairly. The natural resources of any country should not be taken advantage of. Unnecessary and unfair restrictions should not be placed upon such countries, because this is neither just and nor can it ever prove to be a source of improving relations between countries. Due to time constraints, I have mentioned these points only very briefly. In short, if we desire peace to be established in the world, then we must leave aside our personal and national interests for the greater good, and instead we must establish mutual relations that are based entirely on justice. Otherwise, you might agree with me, some of you, due to the alliances, blocs may be formed in future, or even I can say they have started forming. It is not unlikely that disorder will continue to increase in the world, which will ultimately lead to a huge destruction. The effects of such devastation and warfare will surely last for many generations. And so the United States, as the world's largest power, should play its role in acting with true justice and with such good intentions as I have described. If it does so, then the world will always remember with great admiration your great efforts. It is my prayer that this becomes a reality. Thank you very much. Thank you again. According to our tradition, at the end of the function, we normally do silent prayer. So I will do the silent prayer. The Ahmadis will follow me, and all of you, our guests, can pray in their own way. Please, silent prayer. Ameen.
After the event, a special guided tour of Capitol Hill was provided. Concluding this extraordinary day was a resolution introduced in Congress and sponsored by 19 congressional leaders, highlighting Hazur's visit to the halls of Congress and recognizing his commitment to peace.